noticed Brian joined us, first step, invite Brian to give a little introduction. He's with Bentley Systems.
Thanks very much. So yeah, Brian Flett with Bentley Systems. We aspire to be the infrastructure digital twin company. So we are all in on this digital way of working. We've been around for a while. Started 30 years ago in CAD design software, building, I guess what you would call a 3D digital twin of assets that didn't exist yet. Over the last 30 years, we've kind of refined that, moved that off of the desktop onto the web, and very much started focusing on the complete asset lifecycle. So we're now just as much around the capture of existing assets. We've got technology for doing that sort of thing. So we're very excited to work with organizations like this to move that vision forward.
Excellent. All right. So now it's time for questions from the audience. Oh, good, we got one. We'll bring you a mic. So, thanks.
Yeah, this is Prabhupada Sarthi from Wood. Great presentations, guys. Thank you. Lots of insights. Vikas, especially on the design side, I got lots of questions. I'm trying to keep it to two. The first one is, the data that's delivered to contractors to do work on these platforms, right? Overwhelming with data is also not easy. And each group of specialists require a different set of data. How are you taking care of the persona that requires the right set of data and the governance around it? For instance, reservoir data is something operators don't release to engineering contractors. That's your secrecy. You want to keep it in. What thought process has gone into releasing the data? Because there's a difference when you guys do the APC work internally versus a third-party contractor works on it. Any thoughts on that?
Governance during design and build. Who'd like to take that?
Yeah, so it's a very difficult challenge. It seems very simple, the way we are handling it, and to be very frank, we're still working through it, is that you can associate, access with personas that you set up in the digital world. So for example, I can have an operator or owner persona. I can have contractor 1 persona, contractor 2 persona, contractor 3 persona. Each persona is associated with access to the data that they need, right? And those are set up right at the beginning of a project, and then as contractors come in or as people come in, they're associated with a certain kind of persona that allows them to see only the relevant data that they should have access to, right? So that's how we are handling it. It's actually very complex to do that in one system. So I think there's a little bit of work to do with the vendors as well, who provide these systems, to be able to set their systems up this way. The second challenge, that related challenge you're going to go through, is that if there are multiple systems that are connected, you don't want to set up these personas for each one of them. That's just very difficult, and something will go wrong in that space. What you want to have is one authoring kind of set where every other tool that actually accesses it takes on the security protocols of that particular, the main system. That is also actually very difficult to do. So not that we figured it out, but we have some thoughts around it, but there's a little bit of development work needed, even with the products out there, to be able to do what you're saying. I hope that helps.
Yeah. If I could follow up, is that something internally developed, or
No.
is it a function of the software you're using?
Yes. So we are trying not to develop anything that is specific to Shell in this case. Everything is actually general product, but in many cases we are finding gaps, and then we have to work with the vendor to help them and put that in their pipeline so that it gets developed. Because these are practical problems. That's when I say when you go to the coal phase, you face problems that are very simple sometimes, but actually don't allow you to do work in the way you want to do work. And this is one of those. If we cannot provide access in the right way to all the people who need to access the project, then it becomes a big problem.
Right. Thanks for that.
Yeah, I'd say that we're not the experts in the project space. Actually, Coyle out here is one of the experts in the project space. But I'd say that leveraging the standards that are out there and pushing and making sure that they're followed throughout the life cycle is one of the biggest things. And totally echo the aspect of it's not something you build inside your company. It's leveraging standards and then ultimately making sure people adhere to it.
And you had a second question?
Yeah. The second question is about, again, to Vikas, there's an assumption of linearity in the process flow, right? And projects are never linear. People make mistakes, there's rework. There's also outcomes of internal data, like reservoir data goes through multiple cycles and different disciplines use the data structures differently. And that's a very complex problem because we've thought about these issues 10, 12 years back, but how do you resolve that as well? Because one reservoir outcome is used to feed a certain set of decisions. In 2 months' time, another reservoir outcome comes out. And now you're feeding a whole set of another, decisions. And then there's value engineering that goes on with a different outcome as well, right? How do you handle that in this kind of, have you thought about that? What have you done in that space?
No, that's actually, you're very right. I mean, the project delivery process is not very linear, and there's a lot of iterations. The best thing that you can do is, like I said, understand what tools are needed for what stage. So after a certain point, the reservoir properties will be fixed, right? And so there could be change even after that, but then you have to live with those consequences in many cases. So there are things that you can do, setting up a space where it allows for the flexibility in the initial phases of a project, where things are changing and reservoir properties keep changing all the time. But at a later stage, then you're not allowing that flexibility, but you're allowing the linkages where impact is understood very, very clearly downstream. So what that means is, okay, your systems are not as flexible that you can go and easily change things, but now you understand the impact of that particular change, say from a reservoir property, to everybody who's involved. In our case, at a later stage of a project, that becomes extremely difficult. The way we do it is manual. It's basically going person to person and understanding really what the impact is of that change. That's a process that takes a lot of time, and in many cases, you miss things. But the propagation of that change and the impact that it will have on people can be very easily managed with digital if your system is set up right. So that's where you can really improve the way you deliver projects.
Anybody else want to add anything? Oh, good.
Couldn't said it better.
Who's next?
Yeah, we got a question over here.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Seth Taylor from Chevron. Thanks for the great presentations this afternoon. The 2D challenge is a big one. It's the tyranny of 2D, as we sometimes call it. And I'm wondering if ExxonMobil has given some thought to when we can stop managing 2D and just fully do 3D. What do you think the time frame is for doing that?
Man, yeah, we've absolutely put thought towards it. Are we there yet? No. If I were to put like a high level thought on it, 2 to 5 years. I mean, if I were to throw something randomly out there and components of it, I don't think you're ever going to completely get rid of 2D though. There's just components that we would start shifting over from how we manage it in 2D right now into the 3D world.
Yeah, I completely agree. We've seen some examples from time to time through our center of practice, but I think the time frame is about right, between 2 to 5 years at this time before we can actually start having 3D as a cornerstone.
Let's work together to figure that out.
Yeah.
So
There's a forum at 4 p.m. where we're going to talk.
And is that a technology issue, or is it compliance and regulatory requirements on the 2D documents that we?
Mostly, I think in the compliance aspect of it. I don't know if there's a big technology hurdle that you would. I mean, you said it, Vikas. There really isn't a big technology hurdle there at the end of the day.
I mean, what we're seeing a lot in the design side is a lot of the engineering firms are designing in 3D, even if contractually they're supposed to deliver 2D diagrams at the end of the day, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of the world is moving to 3D already, and then they're forced to kind of print 2D renderings from those 3D models because they have these old contractual mechanisms in place.
And then
So
half
it's,
the time dump the 3D. sometimes.
exactly. Well, that's the key.
Yeah,
Don't
no,
dump
right,
the
don't
3D. But I think it's much more of a contractual and that kind of an issue than a technology issue.
I'm going to
It's an awesome question.
I'm going to
so-
bring up a little different viewpoint on this transition from 2D to 3D. It's a usability type thing, and I'll give an example of the cell phone. This is very much image-driven, the dialogue boxes, as compared to what existed before this, which was basically text-based. I think that when we have good devices to display 3D, and that side of the problem is the usability side of it is solved, and there's good ways to display it, you'll see a shift, a rather sudden shift to 3D from 2D. So my sense is it's a usability issue. That needs to be solved.
I definitely think there's a component to it there, right? And you're probably alluding to, am I going to have something on my head, in my eyes, or something like that to be able to present stuff to me? Don't know. I mean, I'd say though that you do have a phone that's pretty capable at this point in time to be able to do that in relative usable ways. It's just it's not implemented yet. We're not implementing it at scale.
Yeah.
Visualizing that in the 3D world, I mean, think about just even visualizing risk versus on a spreadsheet and just color coding that, right? That helps reduce the cognitive load. And from there, be able to jump to that decision immediately. So, I mean, I guess the whole point for that is as we continue to socialize this and demonstrate these values, hopefully that, the rest of the industry will come along as well.
Well, I'll point out that the providers of 3D models are starting to adopt technologies that gamers use to provide the 3D model and the fast interaction and stuff like that. And when that comes to market, I don't know. I'm predicting it's the usability issue.
Yeah, no, agree.
And this isn't something that honestly it's new, right? The military's been doing this for a long time. Taking advantage of real-time 3D and then partnering up and thinking about like the simulations and things like that, and running different types of consequences and outcomes to help see those, see those scenarios.
Google LVC, and you won't be probably disappointed in what they're doing in the military space.
Well, I know Bentley has a relationship with NVIDIA, right?
NVIDIA, yeah, exactly.
And for that kind of stuff, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've been seeing, especially, the gamers are the same way the phones really moved forward with the consumer device. It's the same thing with the gaming, and so yeah, absolutely. I think there's going to be more and more collaboration between your traditional design firms and your CAD software with these gaming engines, so that you can actually immerse yourself in an environment and feel like you're in a game, not navigating a CAD program. Right?
Yeah, 100%. One more thing I'd love to step back on though is I think somebody said it yesterday in one of the panels was push versus pull. You absolutely want to pull. So we definitely don't want to push something across somebody, even if it is usable at that period of time. So everything that we're measuring across the Exxon right now is pull, and there's a heavy pull. I'll say that for sure.
Go for another question.
We got a question here.
Good.
Thank you very much, Ed. Seth, I loved your question. You're talking about bringing in the operations aspect of the ownership that you mentioned. That you said that you wanted. I think gentleman from Shell, Vic has mentioned how operations is taking ownership as early as possible in the custody of these assets. That's how you're going to get to that pull. So the question is, how can we go back into these operational environments where we have legacy? We talked about 2D. Some of these, I've been in the warehouses where these are 1.5 miles, or was there a quarter mile long by a quarter mile wide by 40 feet tall. There's a lot of stuff that we need to digitize to really access that content, that insights that are there. Is that part of this vision of a visual asset? Or, how can we get there when we've got such a huge technical debt with all the information that we have that has insights, but it's locked in with our current policies? We're throwing that data away very quickly with data retention policies. Every 3 years, it's got to go before we can even identify that it's valuable. What are we doing to address some of the legacy technical debt that we have, to get to that future vision? Because those two visions can't live and coexist at the same time in the same environment.
Right. They can only probably do that for a period of time before it's data overload the opposite way. But I guess one thing that I wanted to hit on that you were saying, it's not a technology problem now. Like I can some of that data, it might just fall off
You've got
end of the
scrapers
day.
OCR.
And one of the things that we're seeing, right, just in the past couple of years is, I mean, I can scan an entire asset in sometimes 30 minutes, hour and a half with the new technology that's out there, and have accuracy enough to where I can do all the planning work that I want to do. We can automate that to be able to go daily, weekly, whether it's robotics, drones, it could be anything, to be able to capture that information. And so, then that potential legacy data, you might drop off some of the old data that you retained from back in the day, and you start moving towards, if it's that simple to capture information now and be able to translate it and tag it and all of that, I don't know if I need it. I might not need it. Might be controversial, but.
We've got an entire group actually focusing on that as well. So it is definitely not something that, as mentioned, right, it isn't a technology problem, but you do need a lot of resources to focus on that and make sure, like, when do you stop and when do you start digitizing as well? So when Ralph showed that Venn diagram about, visualization, data aggregation, and simulations and things like that.
Looks super similar.
Yeah, looks super similar, but there's multiple groups inside ExxonMobil really focusing on that data aggregation piece.
Question here.
Yeah, maybe I can
Ralph,
add a little bit.
Ralph, we have another question.
Yes,
Picasso
Verdi
had it.
Wahyo Sudibio from Shell. I was drawn to this gaming analogy we spoke about earlier. And it occurs to me that it's not just 3D, right, in the gaming space. It's actually 4D because there's a time dimension. Let's look at flight simulation games like a Microsoft Flight Simulator. Yep. So my question is maybe for Exxon, if you think about 3D, are you guys also thinking along those lines? Because I can imagine if you do that, then you have to begin to think about things at the molecular level, like you said, or more nowadays, even like the electron level, because power and process are converging. So I was wondering about that, because that, to me, that would mean that, hey, you're gonna start to converge 3D with process models or power models or electron models of some sort. So
Definitely
what's your thoughts there?
Yeah, I'd say definitely part of the journey. I'd say it's a little bit further down the journey from a standards part. There's a lot of great stuff that's already happening inside our company, probably Shell's, everybody's company, but with that. But I think the advent of the game engines and the ability for them to be able to let you do it quicker, faster, and potentially more open ways than in the past, definitely enable that. But for us, we're trying to focus on we're seeing there be just a problem. I'd say problem. It's an opportunity for being able to centralize that information and make it agnostic and open to start. But process simulation integration into all of it for us, absolutely. Okay. Hopefully that helped answer.
I feel a need to add the benefit of flexibility in this. You think about it in the oil and gas industry and many others, but just oil and gas in the past few years, when the pandemic happened, deep decline, the war in Ukraine causing shortages, this industry is dynamic, and being able to do projects more quickly, design them, implement them more quickly, allows the industry to be much more flexible to address how dynamic our world has become.
I'd say look up Project Anywhere on YouTube.
Yeah.
And that's some of our inspirations as well. So.
We're done. We need to transition to a break.
Oh, thank you for that reminder.
Good.
So at 4 o'clock in this room, we're going to have a discussion group for the most part, very short presentations, mostly Q&A around the next generation of digital twins, sustainable asset digital twin. You will have access to the world-renowned experts in this area.